everybody. Welcome to the PVD Horror Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I am joined here today with director Lorcan Finnegan. Lorcan is here to discuss his new film, Nocebo, which is an RLJE Films release and is in theaters November 4th and on digital and on demand November 22nd, and going to be on Shudder at a later date, which I don't know. So that's it for that one. Hey, Lorcan, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks, man. Good to talk to you.
You too. So I just got to check out Nocebo, and I'm a little blown away. I literally just finished it right before we hopped on here.
All right, cool. Good.
I'm fresh in on it. That was an amazing film, and I am really excited for people to check that out. I have to say that.
Thanks very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's cool. You're just fresh out of the theater in your home.
So can you give our listeners just like a brief overview of what the film is about, its premise and everything? Spoiler free.
Yeah, it's a supernatural psychological thriller about a fashion designer who's suffering from a tick-related illness. And her business is suffering. She's like a kids fashion designer. And help arrives in the form of a nanny from the Philippines who helps look after her kid, and also uses traditional Filipino folk healing to help this lady, but also reveal what's actually wrong with her.
Yes. And the trailer alludes to a little bit of that with the nanny. So I don't think we're giving anything away when we talk about that, because the trailer is actually super effective. I had seen that about a month ago, and I was really excited about being able to check this out.
Okay, good.
So, I mean, we got the release in theaters November 4th. Have you been doing like festival circuits with this film or anything like that?
Yeah, we've been doing some festivals. I haven't been at all of them, but yeah, it's been good. We had our kind of big red carpety thing at Sitges in Spain a few weeks ago with Ava and Chai, and that was cool. It's good fun, and the film played in a 1,200 seater theater there.
Oh wow,
which has amazing and everything. So yeah, it's good fun. And then there's a bunch more coming up. I'm going to Southeast Asia soon, to Singapore, and then to the Philippines for the Filipino premiere. So that'll be good fun.
And I'm sure our listeners already caught on to this, but you are Irish. you were born in Dublin.
Yeah.
And that's where you are right now, correct? You're in Ireland?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm in Dublin, and yeah, I was in LA for the screening of Beyond Fest actually as well about a month ago now. Yeah.
We've done a few interviews recently with people that were part of Beyond Fest, and they all had like a really great time, and they just said the energy of that crowd was just like people were happy to be out and checking out movies again and doing these film festivals again, it seems like.
Yeah, totally. It was cool. Although I was very jet lagged when I was doing my Q&A. In my mind, it was about 5 a.m. or something. But yeah, it was cool. Great crowd, great cinema. We're in the Los Feliz 3. It's like a really old theater from 1930s.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good fun.
Cool. So I mean, you're not new to making films and doing this, and you've worked with some bigger names in the past too. I know your movie Vivarium had Jesse Eisenberg, which obviously he's a pretty big name here.
Yeah.
So for this one though, I mean, there's some noticeable faces, but I think the person who really seems to stand out is Nanny Chai, and you can pronounce her last name for me.
Fanache.
All right, so she's amazing.
Yeah, she's incredible. Yeah. We're so lucky. That was such a difficult role to cast, and kind of high risk because the pandemic was going on as well. So it wasn't easy to have like normal castings, and yeah, I mean, luckily we did this. This is like an Irish Filipino co-production, which started with me and Garrett kind of thinking about weird connections between shamanism, the arrival of Christianity, followed by colonialism, and how that relates to a kind of consumerism in a capitalist society, and now kind of neo-colonial exploitation of the East by the West. And so it was a kind of a long, interesting journey from like beginning the film to going over to the Philippines 2019 for research, and then pitching the project in China, Macau, to find co-producers from the Philippines. And then they we're developing the project further with them, and the FDCP, the Film Development Council of the Philippines, and Screen Ireland. And Bianca and Brad from Epic Media in Manila, our co-producers, had worked with Chai before on a film, and they suggested her along with a bunch of other actors, because they were trying to find somebody from Cebu also, which is quite specific, and for her to speak Cebuano in the film, which is the dialect from the area. So yeah, we saw a bunch, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 15 people for the role, but Chai did a self-tape and sent it in. It was just like, wow, definitely her.
Yeah.
And then we got on Zoom and we did some more stuff, and we rehearsed. But she had this amazing quality where she could be both intimidating and sort of submissive and very warm and friendly, all within like seconds of each other. So she could say something that you might find a little bit weird, but then she'd have a lovely big warm smile at the end of her delivery, which makes you think, okay, she's fine. But then she'd give you a look and you're like,
yeah,
is she fine? So you're always on the back foot a little bit. And yeah, like Chai, when she accepted the role, and we talked a lot and developed it further. We had a writer from Cebu also come on and help with the scenes that were set there, and her dialogue and the kind of incantations and stuff that she does. But she literally she came into Dublin. We shot the stuff that's set in London, in Dublin, changed registrations and street signs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we like Chai had to quarantine when she arrived for, I think it was 2 weeks or something. So her first scene, like her first day on set, was like doing the scene where she meets Ava as the door opens, So we're very lucky that she was just like on it straight away, thrown into the deep end. And
in a way, it probably came off a little natural because she was like literally meeting her and, just getting out of quarantine. So it probably felt like, meeting civilization again. And, it's probably pretty genuine. It's so funny.
But yeah, she really shines.
She really does. And you mentioned how she kind of can go, like, she has all these different dimensions that seem like contradicting, but that's exactly what I was thinking when I was watching it. There's like this side of her that can come off as a little innocent, and then there's a side of her that can seem pretty sinister, and then there's that in between that she presents in most of the film. But there's some cool like backstory scenes, and in there you see her as younger, and I was like, at first I was like, I don't know how I'm going to see this person as like a younger and innocent when they show her backstory, but she totally nailed it. And like her role just was very authentic. And then Eva Green was amazing as this person who just seems so fragile. And as you mentioned, like there was a tick related illness that kind of causes, like, I guess, this mental health disorder as well that goes along with it. She just played such a good portrayal of somebody that's incredibly fragile, doesn't seem to know who to trust, wants to be better, and wants to trust the people who are going to make her better, but then quickly realizes that, like, you don't know who you can trust these days because everybody sort of has a little bit of manipulation in them, right?
Yeah, an agenda. Yeah. Now Ava, definitely, she was able to play this sort of fragile character, but also a very strong character, and sometimes looking very glamorous, and other times looking completely haggard. So I think for her that was kind of exciting as well to she was interested in the themes of the film, and she's kind of a human rights activist in her own way. But I think getting to play, like, she likes going, committing entirely and going to the depths of both sides, you know. So it
Sure.
was great for me, it was great to have someone like her who can do all of that, you know.
Yeah. I didn't think about, you had mentioned the colonization piece of the film, and I didn't think of that as like the theme in depth. And I think that's such a great point. Because, you know, there's without getting into spoiler territory, there's this whole underlying theme of, you know, the fashion industry and how it takes over, and how we sometimes can, you know, pull employees from uh, impoverished areas because they'll work for less, and that's kind of something that we
Yeah.
see play out throughout the film. And I was, when you said the colonizing, it's true. That's like modern day colonizing, because, you know, and you think
Yeah,
about
it's
what
the
that
new
built.
form, yeah.
You think about what that builds for that impoverished society, like the resentment, the anger that builds within them, and you guys did a great job of portraying some of that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, even Spain colonized the Philippines. You know, it's like King Philip. That's what it's called, the Philippines.
Yeah.
And they brought with them Christianity, and in the Philippines they had these kind of powerful women called the Babylon, who were like priestesses who were like healing women, and they all kind of became demonized with the kind of patriarchy that came with Christianity. So, I mean, all of that was the beginning of this kind of capitalist takeover of the Philippines.
Sure.
Which then, you know, now the West can still has a kind of a ruling hand in a way with neocolonialism via big brands and corporations having their garments or their TVs or their electronics, or whatever, manufactured in these countries for way less, but at the same time absolving themselves of any guilt if anything bad happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super interesting because a lot of the themes you're talking about. So, you know, PVD Horror is based in Rhode Island, and we're about an hour away from Salem. So we're talking about an area that was colonized, and there was native individuals that lived there, and, you know, they were slaughtered, and the ones that existed after that were full of anger and resentment, as much of like what you're describing in a more modern day approach. But King's Philip War was had there, and that's where a lot of that massacre had happened. So there's a lot of like overlapping themes here.
I wonder, was it like a kind of manifestation of kind of collective guilt that ended up feeding into, you know, all the weirdness in Salem?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Christianity piece, and that was huge. Anything that was like strayed away from that was considered the devil's work. So just interesting overlapping theme there. So I want to ask you about kind of your preference on films and horror, just kind of taking a little bit of a different turn here. You know, this type of horror, you said supernatural. I think that's good. Like, it's definitely suspenseful. Are these the type of films that you enjoy making? Is there other types of horror that you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy all sorts of films, you know. I think it's a little bit like music, you know. It's like if the artists are taking it seriously and putting in what they believe is good work, you know, it generally comes out as being a good film or whatever. It's only when like horror can be manufactured from, you know, there's some big studio horrors that like franchise stuff that gets a little bit like after a while. But I watch all sorts of films, and I'm interested in genre, especially when it also has it reflects on the culture of today, the society of today, because that's sort of the tradition of genre, was always sort of seeing the world through a different lens in order to be able to understand it better. So I always find those films a little bit more interesting because they can live on in your mind afterwards.
Yeah, I also like those as like time capsules too sometimes. Like we think of you know, Romero's like Dawn of the Dead. We always talk about like, you know, that was the capitalism piece of it that was going on. Like, you know, they talk about the shopping mall kind of representing that consumerism that was ingrained in all of us. And just, I like looking at that and thinking like, oh, that was, I mean, it's still present this day, but that was a big theme at that time. And that's something they were trying to capture. But like, it's nice
Yeah,
to be able to do that with films and look and, think about that.
yeah, totally. I mean, even like traditional folklore was kind of doing that in a way. A lot of the stories were to warn people about certain aspects of society, or don't do
Yes.
this because this could happen to you, and to kind of keep people on the straight and narrow to a certain extent. So I mean, now moving into like audio visual storytelling, it's good to kind of continue with that tradition in a way.
Sure. Are you a fan, or do you keep up with horror films from Ireland?
Yeah, I've
Do you have any
seen
favorites,
probably.
or any ones that you would recommend to listeners?
um yeah, Kate Dolan's new film was cool. Have you seen it? You're Not My
No,
Mother?
no. What was it?
You Are Not My Mother. It's a
No, I don't think.
changeling story.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't
Yeah,
seen that one. No.
yeah, that's worth checking out.
Okay.
I haven't seen my friend Brendan Muldowney's got a new film as well that I think RLJ released it, called The Cellar, which I have to watch. I still haven't watched
We
it.
interviewed him on here. Um,
All right, cool.
yeah,
Good.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
The Hollows. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, the Hallow.
The Hollow. Yep, yep. That the one with
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
had like
And
the
the hole
creatures
in the
and the
ground.
hole in the ground. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that the Hallow is technically a British film, the shot in Ireland. But
Gotcha.
anyway,
Gotcha.
with the hole in the ground, Lee Cronin's film. Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Great performance in that as well.
For sure.
He's just done the new Evil Dead movie. It's coming out soon.
Oh, okay. Same director. Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit. I know your career, you do films, you've done commercials, music videos.
Mhm.
What's your preference, or do you just love having your hands in a little bit of everything?
Um, I mean, I kind of got into filmmaking. I didn't study film. I got into it from just making stuff with my friends. I studied graphic design, but had an interest in shooting stuff, and taught myself how to edit and use After Effects and stuff like that. So I was making short kind of things, and like short films that were kind of mix of animation and live action, and then they got seen by people who then say, oh, we should do a music video, and I go, yeah, great. We made music videos and bigger short films and stuff. So it was kind of an organic process into filmmaking. But I mean, making features like long form to me is the most difficult thing. So therefore it's the more enjoyable challenge to take on.
Okay. Yeah.
From like coming up with a story to like getting the money together to crewing up, collaborating with all the various different people and actors, and it's a big endeavor that takes years. So I enjoy it. Yeah, I enjoy that most. But I mean, between things, I do like making some shorter things. It's hard to get financing to make shorter form content, so you have to just do it all back.
Yeah.
But it's all fun. Keep busy,
It sounds
making
like
stuff.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest challenges with making Nocebo?
It was all pretty challenging. I mean, a lot of the creature stuff, without being too spoilers, was tricky, because just with the way films are kind of independent films anyway in Europe are structured, they don't like spending a lot of money that would normally be spent in post-production at the beginning. But you have to do that. You have to commit to it if you're doing creature stuff, because there's a big lead-in time of design, of fabrication, of testing, and all that kind of stuff, which it's more convenient to producers to do that in post-production, with whatever's remaining. There's never enough. Right. So like all of that was kind of quite new to me, and brilliant fun and interesting. I worked with a guy called Connor O'Sullivan on all of that. But like in terms of like shooting wise, I don't know, there was a scene where the Vesmodo fashion TV commercial shoot, which is a bit meta because I've worked in commercials as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's true.
And Christine has a kind of a meltdown during the show. during the shoot. That was like written completely differently. Well, not completely differently, but it was written as a much larger scene, more complex, that was supposed to be shot across 2 days. And our schedule kind of got compacted because COVID was also another thing. It was a giant pain in the ass. We had like fucking all these costs, so like loads of the budget ends up going towards testing, sticking those sticks up your nose, and quarantining actors and all this kind of stuff. So we ended up having less shoot days. So our schedule got crunched, and we ended up only having, I think, half a day to shoot that scene. But we booked a spotlight for the previous plan. So me and Radek, the DP, were like, okay, well, we've got this room and we have a spotlight. What can we do, really? So we had to kind of think on our feet and come up with that scene pretty quickly, just going minimal and using just the spotlight on Ava and on the other people in the dark, to create this slightly trippy sequence. So that was challenging, but it worked out okay in the end, I think.
Yeah, that was a really effective scene. So yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
I was more thinking you were going to mention something with like there's a scene with some fire, which I always imagine being a tough thing to capture.
Yeah, well, I did it on Vivarium. We burnt down a house, so I had some experience with that.
You were already experienced. You knew what to do.
Yeah, well, we had like, I mean, there's a lot of tricky stuff. There's, we were matching locations in the Philippines and in Ireland. We even had to get, there's a dog that appears in a scene in Ireland that looks very particular, and we had to find like a dog double in Manila that would match that dog.
Yeah.
So there's all these kind of challenges. We shot some of the interior stuff that was.
Wait, so those were two different dogs?
Yeah.
Now I got to go back.
Yeah, we couldn't transport the dogs. We had a dog suit made with hair and stuff like that could fit onto a dog, and it had to be like tailored for the second dog, then adjusted, and complicated. All these kind of that's all filmmaking kind of stuff,
Yeah. So you have a dog wearing a dog suit. All right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
never noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, the scenes. There's some big dramatic scenes that were technically tricky. But I mean, with all of those things, there's always a lot of planning, a lot of chatting about what we can and can't do, and testing and all of that kind of thing. So they don't seem as daunting when you're actually shooting them, because you've already prepped them a lot,
I wanted to ask you this. So you mentioned earlier, a lot of this woman's issues stem from a tick.
Yes.
Any particular reason a tick was chosen, and have you ever been bitten by a tick?
No, I didn't actually know that much about ticks before we got into this project, and I'm now quite familiar with them. We even shot some like real ticks as reference. We weren't sure whether we were going to use a real tick or replace it, or a kind of mixture of both. But when we were shooting in the Philippines, we had like, we had like a prosthetic neck with some hair coming down from it. And I was talking to the production designer over there, was sourcing some ticks. For some reason, I thought, I don't know, they'd go to a lab where they're being studied or something and get some. I don't know why I thought that, but anyway, it turned up the easiest, most efficient way of keeping ticks fresh was just to have a dog that had ticks on them.
Oh my God.
There in the studio, and just sort of pluck them off while they're still full of blood, to put them onto this prosthetic neck and shoot them. Really, really disgusting. And yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why there's a tick in the film, metaphorical as well as connected to folklore. There's a mama barang in the Philippines. Is like a type of sorcerer who will use insects that to go into people's bodies and draw things out, and they can be channeled. So the tick kind of acts as a kind of conduit for this sorcerer. So that's one of the reasons, but also there's chronic Lyme disease is one of these kind of one of these illnesses that is very difficult to diagnose, and some people think it's psychosomatic because they can't find any like evidence in the blood work that there's anything actually there. Different to Lyme disease, but chronic Lyme disease is when it keeps coming back in these waves. Not hugely dissimilar to like long COVID or something, where they can't really determine whether, you know, how to cure it. And that's kind of related to placebos and nocebos, and so there's all this kind of interconnectedness around the reason why there's a tick in the movie.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I asked that question, because you just gave me some more things to think about. I didn't realize some of the like the more folklorish reasoning behind it. I mean, ticks are rampant over here, so it's like they're more just like something that's terrify us because nobody wants to get Lyme disease, obviously. And but for me, one of the things is like there's certain textures that kind of freak me out, or and when there's a few scenes where like early on the dog has a bunch of ticks all over him, that just creeps me out so much, the texture on that. And there's just something so like grotesque about seeing a bunch of ticks together on any animal, and that just was so effective for me of like setting the tone, like I'm going to get uncomfortable in this movie.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And you started off right at the beginning.
Especially when I think it was described in the script as like a cluster of ticks. So like if you Google image cluster of ticks,
it's
see some
horrendous
imagery.
I have a hard time looking at it, but then I can't stop looking at it, and then I feel just like nauseous. It's gross.
Especially on the insides of dogs' ears, like just hundreds of them all clung together is like you know, like
I know exactly what picture you're talking about too, and that's because I've definitely looked at it just to challenge myself, and no, it's not a good sight. Can you just tell the listeners the reasoning behind the title, because you did allude to it just now. You said nocebo and placebo, for anyone who's not familiar with what a placebo is.
So nocebo is Latin for I will harm. It's essentially, and a placebo is I will help, I think. So a placebo is works on this mind-body connection principle, where if you think something is making you better, it can actually have a physical result. And it's particularly with pain relief and things like that. But interesting, and that's why you know, when I was a kid, if you stung yourself with nettles, you'd get a dock leaf, and my mom or my dad or grandparents, whatever, you'd rub on it and say rub in and out, take the sting of the nettle out, which isn't dissimilar to a spell. And apparently there is actually nothing in a dock leaf, like chemically, that will reduce the sting of a nettle. But because you grow up with it and you believe it, it works, weirdly. So it's better not to question it too much, just accept the pain. But on the other hand, there's nocebos, which are the opposite, which if you really, really believe that something's going to harm you, your mind can make that real. So there's tons of instances of this throughout history, of where people have actually died because they believed that they were going to die. And Garrett and I had read this book years ago about sleep paralysis. We're kind of interested in sleep paralysis, but the title was Sleep Paralysis, Placebos, Nocebos, and the Mind-Body Connection, a Study in Medical Anthropology by Shelley Adler. It's kind of an academic book, but its kind of main focus was on Hmong refugees after the Vietnam War.
The sons.
Exactly. Southern Lateral Death Syndrome, all of that. And, you know, they had this, the pressing spirit, the dab song, I think it was called, that would like sit on chest, but like in their belief system, if they were visited by this pressing spirit, they'd go to a shaman. The shaman would offer up some ritual to their ancestors, and they'd come away feeling fine. They'd be like, okay, I'm okay now. And they'd normally, they'd have these visitations normally at times of great stress. So obviously after the war, they were all suffering from PTSD probably.
Yeah.
And they were,
and they're all displaced in like foreign places.
Displaced across the US.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And they're taken in by Christian groups and stuff like that and spread around the country. And then they all started having these visitations, and they couldn't go to a shaman because there was no shaman.
Yeah.
So they believed they were going to die. And then one by one, like lots of them started dying across the country. And her hypothesis in this book was that it was their belief that was actually causing them to die, which was really interesting. And there's like a tribe in Central Australia, the RLJE tribe, I think, who they have like a shaman who it's called like I think it's Kurdacha or something, like they're a bone pointing. So like if you commit a heinous crime, they didn't have prisons there because they were living, in the desert as nomads. So if you committed like murder or rape or something like that, you'd be sent to this shaman who'd point this bone at you and you die. And you grew up knowing this all of your life. So like there's instances of people going to hospital in Australia, having had the bone pointed at them and believing that they're going to die, and doctors would run tests and there's nothing physically wrong with them, and then a few days later they die. So
that's wild.
It can be powerful stuff, but it's the exact same with like just the idea of a curse. Like if you go to a fortune teller and they tell you something terrible is going to happen to you, you're probably going to make it real,
Well, we start to like gear our choices and the way we view the world through that thought that like this is what's ultimately going to happen. So yeah, we kind of steer ourselves in that direction.
Totally. And in a positive way, it can be the same. You're going to meet somebody in 3 weeks' time, and then you start like really looking around, going, "Oh, maybe it's her."
Yeah. One of the things I talk to people a lot about is like imposter syndrome. And one of the ways you get through imposter syndrome is just like kind of telling yourself, like, I can do this, I have the skills to be able to do this thing. And then you start to believe it. And then ultimately you do it, unless you really suck at it, then that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of the same thing. It's like how the mind can really steer the direction that we go, whether that's negative or positive.
Completely.
Very interesting. Excellent explanation. I love the way the direction you just went with that. And it makes me also kind of think again, another layer of this story. So I hope when people check this out, they'll have that explanation in their head, because I think that also has a lot to do with what you were just talking about with like that chronic Lyme disease. And, does it exist, or is it more of a somatic symptom caused by the person's kind of thoughts that they have it, or that it's coming back? So yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
a lot to unpack there. So
yeah, good.
excellent. Lorcan, you have like a great wealth of knowledge about a lot of different things, but ultimately you are a filmmaker, so you get to kind of explore a lot of those themes, I'm sure, in the projects you work on. But what in general got you into film in the first place?
I don't really know. That's what I was saying earlier. It's this kind of gradual process from doing graphic design. I started having projects in college that were, I made excuses to kind of shoot things and impose a narrative on them, or like, I think I just like storytelling visually without knowing that that's what I was into at the time.
Sure.
So like I think we had like a college project to make a movie poster. So I made like a movie poster, but I made a fake trailer for the movie. And it was kind of like a remake of the Shoemakers and the Elves with little kind of evil puppets. And it was kind of funny thing. But I remember playing that to like at our final year show or whatever. And it got a little audience had gathered, and they're all watching it, and most of the students in my class had made like print work or that's on the walls, and kind of needs explanation, you sort of need to read their statement and then look at the work and then consider it and then maybe talk to them about what they were trying to achieve. Whereas with the little film that I'd made, it was just people were able to stand there and watch it and laugh and talk amongst each other. And I remember thinking, that's great. It's just like, I'm off the hook about having to explain it. But also that like it's a linear experience, because we were kind of specializing at the time in design towards interactivity, and there's all this talk about interactive movies and stuff. And I remember thinking, people don't really want to, you know, press buttons while watching a film to make it go a different way. I mean, there's games for that. They want to sit there and have a story kind of wash over them. So I think that from that point, I was kind of like interested in narrative, I think, and then making stuff, and those little bits got just bigger and more challenging. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but
no, I think it does. But I feel like almost just from watching this film and kind of hearing you speak about it, it's almost like now you've found a way to kind of incorporate different aspects of your own interests or things that you find fascinating into these films to kind of tell a story, and then people walk away and they can glean from it what they want. If they want just a little narrative and that's good for them, that's fine. But if you want to look deeper into it, I mean, not everyone's going to get the privilege to talk to you about this like I do, but you know, hopefully it makes people think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, that's it. And that's like what me and Garrett end up talking a lot about, just stuff. And, you know, also what kind of, how we can take a segment of our own socio-political kind of concerns and explore them properly in a film, and then leave that for people to interpret as they will, whether it's entertainment or take more from it. That's cool. But in the process, we get to learn a lot about a lot of random stuff.
Yeah,
you know,
which is great. You know, you learning is a forever thing, right? So you can never learn too much.
Yeah. And particularly on this film, it was a real adventure, going from, you know, starting with a little nugget of an idea and ending up shooting in the Philippines. Was great. But yeah, I mean, I'm working on a new film called Goliath, which is
cool,
a sort of dystopian fable set in the near future about creating monsters in order to start wars and steal natural resources. So that's all like being inspired by this kind of secular nature of war and society, but also the invasion of Iraq and you know, the invention of weapons of mass destruction, all that kind of stuff. So we'll get to dig into all of those themes on the project.
When do we? Is that still in development, or what stage of the process are you guys in with that film?
We've got a script ready. We've been developing it for a few years already, so we're hoping to, you know, we're starting to finance it now. We'll hopefully shoot it in the next year.
Awesome.
Start shooting it in the next year. Yeah, it's really complicated though. Again, way more complicated than Nocebo. Bigger.
Yeah. Well, one thing I just want to, you know, say is just to let you know, like, what I appreciated is there's ways to get messages out that don't alienate people or make people feel like, oh, this is too political, I don't know if this is going to be for me. Like, the storytelling is the way you go about that, right? There's the story, and then, like you said, people can take from it what they like. So if people want to look deeper into it and look for those societal messages, they can. But if they just want to sit back and have a story being fold out in front of them, they can do that too. And I think you did a really good job of being able to give that option, not forcing anything on people. I mean, it's there, but it's also like, I can also sit back and just appreciate it for what it is if it's something that I just doesn't connect with me or whatever. It doesn't alienate anyone. So I think that was really good. And the film itself, like I said, I was blown away. I really did enjoy it. So congratulations.
Thanks very much.
Can you tell people where to find you on social media?
Just my name, Lorcan Finnegan. There's 2 N's in Finnegan. On Twitter and Instagram. They're the only 2 things I have.
Okay.
So that's where I am.
All right, cool. Lorcan, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I appreciate this. I wish the other two guys were here. I know they would have enjoyed the film, and they would have enjoyed speaking with you, but just me today. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, great. No, it was a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank
I hope we'll talk to you again about the next movie.
Absolutely. So everybody, make sure you check out Nocebo on November 4th in theaters, and then digital and on demand November 22nd. And for those of you who have Shudder, it will be on there at a later date. You guys can enjoy it over and over and over. So everybody, thank you and have a great night.